The cameras rolled, the applause swelled, and Meghan Markle stepped into the studio lights dressed in a sharp white suit. Her smile was soft, calm, practiced. It was supposed to be a moment of a warm return to daytime television. Was The View, after all, not a battlefield? But from the moment she sat at the panel, something felt wrong. The usual hosts, Joy, Sunny, Alyssa, and Whoopi welcomed her with smiles, compliments, and polite small talk. The air was light, the mood rehearsed. Meghan answered questions about her foundation, her children, even her favorite books. But then Whoopi gave a small nod toward the stage wing, and something shifted. "Ladies and gentlemen," the producer's voice echoed faintly from backstage. "We've got a surprise guest joining us, a friend of the show, Stephen Colbert." The audience cheered. Meghan's eyes flicked toward the side of the set, her smile tightening. This wasn't part of the plan. Colbert walked on stage with his usual swagger, holding a coffee mug and grinning. He gave Meghan a polite hug and sat beside her. The atmosphere changed, no longer casual. It felt sharp, intentional. Meghan Colbert began, his voice light but with a dangerous undertone. "You've spoken a lot about being silenced. Do you ever worry that maybe you've said too much?" The panel stiffened. Meghan blinked. "I've only ever spoken the truth," she said calmly. He leaned in slightly. "But truth is tricky, isn't it? Especially when it's curated. But you think people deserve the full story, not just the part that makes the headlines." The audience grew quiet, no laughter, no claps, just waiting. Meghan's hands rested on her lap, folded tightly. "If you think speaking out against abuse, racism, or misinformation is selective, and maybe you're watching the wrong story." Stephen tilted his head. "You ever think maybe the silence from your own family isn't shame, but protection?" The air vanished from the room. Meghan's face froze. Not with anger, but with something deeper recognition. Her breath caught a single tear formed before she blinked it away. She didn't answer. She stood up slowly, microphone still attached to her jacket. "Excuse me?" she whispered. Colbert sat still. Joy and Sunny stared, unsure whether this was real or scripted. Meghan turned and walked off set. Silence. The producers scrambled. The cameras cut to commercial. On social media, clips had already been posted. Viewers across the globe watched the moment on loop, her eyes, her pause, her silent exit. But off-air, Meghan's voice was heard by only one person, her assistant, waiting backstage. She gripped the assistant's wrist and whispered, just loud enough, "He knows about Geneva." "How?" The assistant's face drained of color. In that one line, the nature of the interview changed. This wasn't about gossip. This wasn't just television. Something had been triggered, something buried. Back in the studio, Whoopi stared at Stephen Colbert. "What the hell was that?" she asked. Colbert didn't answer. He just stared at the chair Meghan left behind. The SUV pulled away from the studio in silence. Windows tinted, shields up at least on the outside. Inside, Meghan sat with her, eyes locked on the passing lights of Manhattan. One hand gripping her assistant's phone, the other trembling slightly in her lap. Her assistant, Rachel, finally spoke. "Geneva. You said he knows about Geneva, you mean?" "Yes," Meghan cut in, her voice low but steady. "The trip in 2017, the UN field compound? You remember what happened?" Rachel nodded slowly. She remembered all of it. What the world had believed was a simple humanitarian visit had been something else, something carefully orchestrated, then quickly covered up. Meghan had been invited under the pretense of visiting displaced families and refugee coordinators. But midway through the trip, she was pulled aside ashore into a separate wing of the compound where cameras weren't allowed. It was supposed to be a security briefing, nothing more. But instead, Meghan was asked to sit in on a closed door meeting between two intelligence liaisons, one British, one American, and an unnamed Saudi representative. The tone had been diplomatic, but what was discussed haunted her even now. Arms shipment routes, media control during proxy operations, and most chilling, something referred to only as asset echo. She hadn't understood everything at the time, and they hadn't expected her to. She wasn't royalty yet, just a humanitarian actress with a growing global profile. But they'd needed to cover her visit had been it. Her face in the press had distracted the world from what was really going on inside that building. And now, somehow, Stephen Colbert knew. Back in the SUV, Rachel leaned forward. "You think it's about echo?" Meghan's voice cracked for the first time it always was. By the time they reached the hotel, her security team was already repositioning. A black-clad man approached the car with a small tablet in hand. "There's someone you need to speak to," he said, eyes scanning the street. Meghan hesitated, then nodded. In her suite, the lights were dimmed, curtains drawn. A secure laptop sat open on the desk, already connected to an encrypted video call. The screen flickered. A woman in her late 40s appeared, dark eyes, gray, sweater books stacked behind her. Jules Lang's sister, human rights lawyer, and one of the few people Meghan still trusted. "I was expecting your call," she said softly. "Did Jules leak the footage?" Meghan asked, without hesitation. There was a pause. "He tried." Her voice dropped. "He's missing Meghan. Vanished last week outside Brussels. His apartment was ransacked, laptop gone, but he left me something before he disappeared." The woman leaned off screen and returned with a small flash drive. "It's encrypted. He didn't trust uploading it. Said if anything happened to him, to send it directly to you." Meghan's stomach turned. Rachel moved to take the screen, but Meghan raised her hand. "Send it," she said. "Now." The connection dropped. A secure file transfer began on a separate device. Meghan sat down, rubbing her temples. Her mind raced. Why now? Why today? Why that question on live television? Then it clicked. The British tabloid scandal, the lawsuits, the digital silence campaign. None of it had worked to shut her down. But this was surgical. Bringing Stephen Colbert in wasn't about ratings, it was about control. He wasn't just asking questions, he was delivering a warning. Back in the studio, Colbert sat in his dressing room, staring at a closed folder. He hadn't opened it before the interview. The producer, someone from the network's content advisor group, had handed it to him with a simple note. For segment 3, use discretion. Geneva may trigger her memory. Colbert thought it was just another political cue. He didn't know what Geneva meant. But when he saw her reaction, when he saw the color drain from her face, he realized. He had just lit a fuse. Something was about to explode. The flash drive arrived the next morning. It came by hand, delivered by a courier with no badge, no company label, and no smile. He simply placed it into Rachel's hand, nodded once, and disappeared into the hotel corridor. Meghan sat cross-legged on the carpet of the suite's living room, hair tied back, eyes locked on the silver device like it was a weapon. 'Cause it was. Rachel inserted the drive into the laptop. A black screen appeared. A single file, no name. Just a timestamp. Gen 83 full. Meghan hesitated, then clicked. The video opened with distorted footage. At first, just blurred shadows moving across a dusty room. The camera angle was low, hidden. It's probably strapped to someone's bag. Then the audio kicked in. British accents. American ones, Arabic phrases, tense, controlled, no smiles. "We believe the asset can stabilize the region in 3 to 5 months. Media insertion to cover the arrival window must involve a humanitarian face. Preferably someone press-tested." Then, unmistakably, her own voice. "I wasn't told about any cameras being restricted, just here for the UN families." Her face appeared in the corner of the frame, confused, being redirected by security guards. The meeting was happening just feet away. Rachel's hand covered her mouth. Meghan leaned forward as if trying to reach through the screen. More voices followed. Cold, powerful. If the press catches wind of this operation, Geneva burns. And with it, so do our diplomatic options. The royal signal must remain clean. No signatures, no fingerprints. The American actress will do fine. That sentence chilled the room. The screen went black. Meghan sat frozen. No tears, just silence. They used me, she whispered. Rachel nodded. You were the distraction. For years, Meghan had carried the weight of public ridicule, media obsession, and brutal invasions into her life. But this was something else. This wasn't about gossip columns or tabloid drama. This was intelligence, statecraft, high level, optics, and now someone had exposed it. But why now? Rachel tapped the keyboard again. A folder had quietly appeared alongside the video. It was labeled view_control_chain. Inside, dozens of documents. Some marked with government seals, blurred scans. Others were emails. Media memos. Names she recognized. Executives, producers, PR advisors. One in particular stood out. The Atlantic Projection Group. She clicked. The file was a presentation, a pitch designed for television networks. Goal: narrative stabilization and reputation management for institutions in decline. One slide showed Meghan's face beside the phrase, Control Point Subject C. Underneath it read, Deploy trusted satirical intermediaries when Subject C threatens to exceed narrative boundaries. Insert moral tension through accountable comedy model. Reduce credibility while increasing emotional volatility. Meghan's heart thudded. Stephen Colbert's face flashed in her mind. He wasn't just a comedian, not last night. It was a delivery system. They used him, she said aloud. Rachel looked up. Ori knew exactly what he was doing. Meghan stood up, pacing now. Panic and anger fought inside her chest. Think I'll run again? Cry, vanish, let the headlines win. She stopped at the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to glimpse the street below. Two men stood at a newspaper stand. Same jackets, same stillness. We need to go, she said suddenly. Now, Rachel blinked. Go where? It's the only person who might know what happened to Jules. Who? Meghan turned, eyes sharp. His sister. That night they flew under assumed names. A private jet paid for through a Swiss humanitarian account Meghan had used during her UN work. No press, no trail, just quiet urgency. They landed just outside Oslo, Norway, at a small cottage in the woods, dimly lit and guarded by thick fog. Jules Lang's sister answered the door. Her eyes were sunken from days without sleep. She held the encrypted copy of the Geneva footage in one hand and a revolver in the other. You should not have come here, she said. Meghan stepped inside anyway. Too late, she replied. They already know we're watching. Inside the cabin, the silence was thick. Wood creaked under each step, and a fire crackled in the stone hearth, its warmth failing to touch the cold tension in the room. Jules Lang's sister, Lynn, placed the revolver on a table beside a half-burned candle. Her eyes didn't leave Meghan. I told him not to send it to you, Ellen said, voice flat. He said you were the only one the public would believe if this ever got out. Meghan nodded slowly. That's why they targeted me, Ellen. Look toward Rachel, and who's she? Someone who still believes in the truth, Meghan said firmly. Rachel nodded once, respectfully. We're not here to make noise. We're here to understand what Jules died for. Ellen's mouth twitched slightly somewhere between sorrow and suspicion. She reached beneath a cabinet and pulled out a weathered map. It had smudges, markings, arrows drawn in different colors. Places circled Geneva, Brussels, Riyadh, and one that made Meghan stop breathing, Sandhurst, England. That's the connection, Ellen whispered. The training base. British intelligence used Sandhurst as the first touch point for Echo. It wasn't just about shipments or diplomacy. They were building profiles, psychological ones. Rachel frowned. "Oh, profiles of who?" "Cultural influencers," Ellen replied. "Actors, royals, activists, anyone who could shape global narrative with a single interview or headline. You weren't just a distraction in Geneva, Meghan. You were a test case. They needed to know how much emotional response could be generated through you." Meghan stepped back as if the air had turned poisonous. "You mean all of it?" she asked. "The leaks, the tabloids, the family silence. It was all designed." Ellen nodded. "Partially, not every event, not every betrayal. But the lens they put on you. Yes, it was controlled." Meghan clenched her fists. "And Colbert?" Ellen hesitated, then moved to a drawer and pulled out a thick file. Inside were photos Stephen Colbert, years ago, speaking at what looked like a defense innovation summit in D.C. Another showed him laughing with a Pentagon media advisor. Another, still, a classified document. Redacted except for one line. Subject Colbert. Approved for limited narrative insertion via late-night interface. Retains cultural capital. Use sparingly. Rachel cursed under her breath. "They've turned comedy into cover fire," Ellen said. "They knew if he questioned you, people would feel entertained, not alarmed. It dulls the edges." Meghan sat down slowly, trying to process. "They're winning," she muttered. "They're burying truth under punchlines." Ellen gave a small, tired smile. "Not if you speak first." The room went quiet. "No one would believe me," Meghan said after a pause. "They'll say I'm paranoid, dramatic, playing the victim again." Ellen pulled a small satellite phone from the shelf. "That's why you're not going to say anything," she said. "Not until we show them." Rachel leaned forward. "Show them what?" Ellen placed her hand on the Geneva flash drive. "The entire Asset Echo dossier. Every intercepted memo. Every visual log. Every name." Meghan looked toward the window. The fog outside was lifting slightly, revealing a black SUV parked far down the hill, unmoving. "Watching? We don't have time," she said. "They're already here." Ellen was calm. "That's why we're sending this now." She handed the flash drive to Rachel. "Use the satellite link. Dump it to 4 locations, secure ones. Iceland, Brazil, Taiwan, and a secure leak channel we have in Prague." Meghan turned to Ellen. "What happens after that?" Ellen sighed. "They'll try to discredit you harder than ever. You'll be called a traitor, delusional, maybe worse. And they'll find me eventually." Meghan hesitated. "Why help me?" Ellen finally looked directly into her eyes. "Because my brother believed in something more than just secrets. He believed in people brave enough to break them." Outside, headlights flickered through the trees. Rachel's fingers moved fast over the satellite keyboard. And Meghan, watching the storm build around them, felt something shift inside. Not fear, not confusion, resolve. It was time to stop performing survival. It was time to fight back. The flash drive was gone, transmitted in 4 separate packets over Ellen's old satellite rig. It was now out in the wild, scattered across encrypted clouds and routed through servers from Reykjavik to São Paulo. Meghan watched the final upload. Bar crawl to 100%, then vanish. There was no turning back now. Outside the cabin, the SUV that had been parked in the distance was gone, but everyone in the room knew it would return. And next time, it wouldn't be alone. Rachel shut the laptop and turned to Meghan. "We need to move tonight." Ellen nodded. "I have a contact in Copenhagen, a former NATO tech specialist. She can get you to Iceland by morning. After that, it's up to you." Meghan stood by the window, arms folded. The fog had cleared. Moonlight lit the tops of the trees. Her mind drifted not to Geneva, not even to the view, but to something further back. Something she hadn't thought about in years. It's an old meeting in a Kensington conference room. She had been newly married, still learning how to carry herself in those stiff, echoing royal spaces. An aide had slipped her a file asking her to review her communications commitments. Inside were press statements, talking points, and two emails flagged with red stars. One was from a BBC editor. The other, oddly enough, from a producer on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Back then, it had seemed like a harmless opportunity. Appearances were part of the game. But now she saw it for what it was, a breadcrumb. A trail laid years ago to guide her toward this very moment. She'd never accepted the invitation, but they hadn't forgotten. Rachel broke the silence. If we go to Iceland, you'll be safe. For a while, Meghan turned around. Safe isn't enough. Both women looked at her. They want me to disappear, to retreat. But if I do that, they win. Every woman, every voice they tried to silence with doubt or humor gets buried with me. Rachel was hesitant. So, what are you saying? I'm going back on camera. You mean another interview? Ellen asked. Oh. Meghan said a broadcast. One they can't control. She grabbed her bag and pulled out an old contact sheet names, numbers, favors owed. One stood out, Zaid Rahimi, an independent journalist based in Istanbul, former Al Jazeera, now Rogue, known for broadcasting what others wouldn't touch. He had once asked her for a story. She had declined. This time, she wouldn't. 3 hours later, they were in the air. A small chartered flight, no tailcode, no manifest. Just the hum of engines and a cabin thick with adrenaline. Meghan sat at the back, scribbling notes, Rachel by her side, organizing files into what would become evidence for the world to see. Ellen stayed behind, disappearing into the Norwegian dark like a ghost. By the time they landed near Istanbul, Zaid was already waiting. He didn't smile. Didn't greet her with charm or flattery. Just held out a tablet, pressed play, and showed her the latest headlines. Breaking Meghan Markle's on-air meltdown tied to leaked UN footage. Royal insider claims Duchess saw something dangerous in 2017 Geneva trip late. Show under scrutiny, was Colbert's interview orchestrated? Colbert had gone silent. The View had issued a vague statement about editorial misjudgment. But neither offered any real explanation. The story was cracking. Inside Zaid's studio, bare walls, a single camera. No producers. Meghan stood beneath harsh light. No makeup, no cue cards, just truth. Zaid looked into the lens, then back at her. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure, she said. The red light on the camera blinked on. And Meghan Markle began to speak, not as a duchess, not as a victim, but as a witness. She laid it all bare. Geneva Asa Echo, the emails, the footage, the fact that people like Stephen Colbert had been handed scripts designed to question her humanity under the disguise of comedy. But she didn't stop there. She named names, not just hosts and producers, but officials, advisors, institutions. You can shame a woman for speaking, she said. You can mock her into silence, but you cannot erase the facts. And you cannot erase me. By the time the feed ended, over 4 million people were watching. By morning, it would be 80 million. And Meghan, she didn't cry this time. She didn't run. She simply closed the laptop, looked out the window, and waited. Because now they would come. They came at dawn, not with sirens or handcuffs, but with screens. The morning after Meghan's live broadcast with Zaid, the world changed. Not all at once, but with a cold, methodical pace that felt more like erosion than eruption. News anchors across continents scrambled to rewrite their segments. Networks that once mocked her began issuing cautious statements about emerging reports. Some called her courageous. Others questioned her mental stability. A few tried to bury the story under coverage of a celebrity scandal and arrest. A leaked video, anything to distract. But it was too late. The footage was out. The documents were circulating. And people were paying attention. In London, a royal press secretary resigned suddenly. In Washington, a Senate committee issued an inquiry demand for intelligence spending tied to private media partnerships. And in New York, The Late Show canceled its next 3 episodes. Colbert hadn't spoken. But an anonymous staffer leaked an internal memo. We were told she wouldn't break. That she'd cry and retreat. That was the point. She hadn't. Now, they were the ones on the defensive. Inside a quiet safe house overlooking the Bosporus, Meghan sat in a small chair, her legs tucked under her, staring out the window. She hadn't slept. Rachel, exhausted, was curled up on the couch. Zaid worked quietly in the corner, fielding encrypted messages, verifying sources. A knock. Rachel jolted awake. Meghan stood calmly and opened the door. Ellen, she stepped inside, pale and hurried. I came as soon as I saw the numbers. It's everywhere. Meghan gave a tired smile. I know. Ellen's face changed. That's not why I'm here. She handed Meghan a sealed envelope. It was old-weathered, like it had passed through too many hands. Meghan opened it carefully. Inside was a single page, typed, no signature. What you saw in Geneva was one operation. There are others. Dubai, Lagos, Buenos Aires. Same playbook, same assets. The goal isn't control its collapse. Flood the media with so much noise. Truth becomes impossible to recognize. You were never just the distraction. You were the firewall. And now it's breached. Rachel stood up slowly, scanning the page. What does it mean? Meghan's voice was steady. It means this isn't over. Zaid approached. We need to go global. Okay. Translate the broadcast. Push the documents into forums, networks, campuses. Make it impossible to bury. Ellen shook her head. That'll make you the target, not just of media, of governments. Meghan looked at her. They already made me the target. I'm just finally choosing what for. She turned to Rachel. Pull everything we have on Lagos. Jules had flagged it once before. Said there was an influencer. There's somebody being set up the same way. Rachel moved to the laptop. Got it. Female journalist, young, big following. Went silent 6 weeks ago after questioning a UN envoy's trip. Get me a call with her family, Meghan said. She's still alive. We can't let her be next. Ellen stepped forward. This is bigger than you think. I know, Meghan replied. That's why we're not hiding. By nightfall, protests had begun in Berlin and São Paulo. Not huge, not yet. But something was moving. Outside late-night studios in Los Angeles, signs appeared. Comedy is not cover. We see the script, let her speak. And in Geneva itself, Abena hung over the UN gates an enormous sheet of canvas, spray-painted with just 3 words. She was right. Okay? At 2 a.m., as the world spun on, Meghan sat alone in the safe house living room. The lights were dim. The city beyond the windows was quiet. Then her phone buzzed. A single message. Unknown sender, you're not supposed to know about Buenos Aires. She stared at the screen. No link, no threat, just a sentence. Chilling in its simplicity, a second message came through. A video file. She opened it. Inside, a grainy recording. A woman in her 20s, tied to a chair, a bruised face. This is what happens to firewalls. Meghan's hands shook. For the first time in days, she felt afraid. Not for herself, but for the others. It's the ones still being watched, the ones still being used. She whispered to the screen, almost a prayer. I won't let you disappear. And with that, she stood, walked to the center of the room, and began to plan her next move. Because now it was war. The rain hit hard against the rooftop as Istanbul stirred awake beneath a gray morning sky. Meghan stood by the window of the safe house, her face reflected in the glass, illuminated by the glow of a laptop screen behind her. On it, maps, emails, transcripts, and surveillance footage played in silence. Rachel and Zaid were asleep on makeshift beds, exhausted from a night of building what had now become something larger than a leak, larger than even a movement. It was a reckoning. She sipped her tea slowly, not flinching as another encrypted message arrived. FROMMAKAROV.proxy @ subject. Fall of Buenos Aires attachment. Internal memo. Initiate curtain phase ***. Meghan opened the document. Her heart pounded. It outlined a new strategy code named Curtain, phase meant to flood media across multiple continents with fabricated crises. Fake terror alerts, celebrity arrests, social media blackouts. The goal was to shift focus, redirect outrage, and erase truth under an avalanche of chaos. One line stood out. Do not let Markle reach Brazil. Echo fallback compromised. Geneva is unstable. Deploy counter-narrative agents in Los Angeles, London, and New York. They were moving faster now, and they were scared. By mid-morning, protests surged in Lagos after a local journalist presumed missing was seen in a leaked video on a private military base outside the city. The footage had been part of Meghan's last broadcast. In Buenos Aires, the Argentinian government denied knowledge of any Western information campaigns. But local press had already broken the story of a U.S.-funded disinformation lab discovered beneath an abandoned embassy building. And in Geneva, a rogue security agent posted an unredacted version of the original Echo files. It was trending across the globe within minutes. Back in Istanbul, Meghan, Rachel, and Zayd sat around a table surrounded by devices and chargers. News monitors stacked high. Everything was humming, signals bouncing, stories breaking, history folding in real time. But Meghan wasn't done. This doesn't end with truth going viral, she said. It ends when someone's held accountable. Zayd leaned in. Do you have a name? Meghan paused, then nodded. Yes, and if we take him down, the entire architecture collapses. She reached into her file and pulled out a photo. A man, in a dark suit, holding a drink at a fundraiser in D.C., standing beside two people, one from British intelligence, the other from a major streaming platform. Sebastian Rowe, she said. He was the first to fund Echo. I met him once in Geneva. He smiled like a man who knew how the story ended before it began. Rachel frowned. Do you want to confront him? No, Meghan said. I want him to confess? Zayd blinked. On camera. Meghan's expression hardened. Live. That night, in a warehouse-turned-studio on the outskirts of Ankara, they set the trap. Using a secure line, Zayd contacted Rowe under a false name claiming to be a Hollywood consultant with footage that could implicate Meghan in an international defamation scheme. The bait worked. Rowe agreed to a meeting. He arrived, smug, dismissive, believing he was the smartest man in the room. Until he wasn't. As soon as he stepped into the lights, Meghan appeared. Calm, clear-eyed. Every camera rolling. Rowe tried to backpedal. Y2 don't understand, this is entrapment. But Meghan had already started speaking. Mr. Rowe, you ran Echo from a safe distance. You used culture as camouflage. You made sure people like me were seen, but never truly heard. You turned my life into a test case for algorithmic manipulation. You called it soft power. I call it betrayal. Rowe tried to walk out. Zayd blocked the door. You agreed to a conversation. Now sit. What followed was a stunning 30-minute broadcast. Rowe squirmed, dodged, denied until Meghan played audio, his voice. From years ago. Laughing, just nudged the narrative. She folded eventually. If not, well, emotional breakdowns always sell. That was the moment his face changed. No more smirk. No more confidence. Just a man exposed. By morning, the world had seen it. Rowe was detained in Ankara hours later. The Echo program was officially named in unhearings. Late-night shows across the U.S. opened with apologies, not jokes. Stephen Colbert still hadn't spoken publicly, but The View. That morning's episode was different. No live audience. Just Whoopi alone behind the table. She looked directly at the camera. I said once that walking off doesn't change the conversation. I was wrong. Sometimes it starts it. She paused. And Meghan, if you're watching, I see you now. A week later, Meghan stood on a quiet balcony in Montenegro. She wore no makeup, no entourage, just a single phone buzzing with updates from a world still recalibrating. Rachel appeared behind her. They want you in Brussels next week. A panel on truth in media. Meghan looked out at the sea. No, she said. Let someone else talk for once. She smiled faintly, said what I needed to say. She turned off her phone.